Hello everyone, welcome back to the Beginner's Guide to Keeping Fish Part 5. In this particular video, we are going to be talking about how to clean a fish tank. If you are new to fish keeping, this is definitely the place for you. Now we're going to be demonstrating this on this 150 gallon here, but no matter what size tank you have, it's going to be the same process. We're using this tank because it's going to be a little bit easier to see what we're doing. Hope you enjoy the video. Appreciate you being here. All right, so before we get into actually cleaning the tank, there are some things you're going to need in order to get started. Thing number one, you're most likely going to need some kind of a bucket. Now, this is a very small bucket. You may or may not need this depending on how you empty tank water, but a lot of people use buckets, especially for smaller tanks. We're going to show you what we do in a moment, but a bucket is certainly one thing. What else we got? The glass scraper.
Scraper.
If you are going to be scraping algae on the tank, there are many different types. Some of them have a softer kind of sponge feel to them. This one has more of a blade feel because it's going to help us clean the type of algae that we have on this. I recommend having both on hand. The other thing that you're probably going to need is some filter media. Now this happens to be bulk filter media. This is a great way to save money. If you've got a hang-on back filter or a canister filter, you don't need to buy the cartridges that they sell you for the filters because those get very expensive. You can buy this. I will put an Amazon affiliate link down in the description below if you want to save a bunch of money. And the other thing you're going to need, what is that fine thing?
It's a gravel vac.
Absolutely. So we're going to use a gravel vac to get some of the detritus and the fish waste out of the substrate. This is especially important if you do not have a planted tank. If you have a planted tank, we'll talk about that as we clean the tank as well. So those are some of the things you're going to need. Now, if you are new to fish keeping, there are some reasons why we want to make sure our fish tank is properly maintained. One, we really want to have good water parameters so our fish remain healthy. We want to remove some of the uneaten food and fish waste in the substrate, and
you want your tank to look good.
Absolutely. So doing all these things, your tank's going to look good. It's been about a week since we've cleaned this particular tank, so it's definitely due. Now, one of the questions that you may be asking yourself is, how often do I have to maintain my fish tank? And one of the things that we always say on our channel is you want to be able to empty enough water to maintain 20 parts per million nitrates or less throughout your water change schedule. So if your water changes, if your water is getting above that 20 parts per million nitrates, that's the guide that we use to determine when it's time to do a water change. The nice thing is if your bioload isn't changing, what you've added to your fish tank isn't changing, once you get a feel for how much your nitrates are fluctuating from the time that you first clean your tank until the next time, you don't have to test your water every single week.
So before you start cleaning your tank, you definitely want to turn off the power to your filters and your heaters. You can leave your light on if you need it to see, but make sure the light is secure and it will not fall in your tank while you're cleaning it.
Okay, so I have my handy dandy assistant here, Joanna, and first thing that we like to do when we are cleaning a tank is take care of the front of the glass. If there's any algae on the front of the glass, you can go ahead and use your algae scraper to remove that algae. The reason I like to do this first is if you've got a decent amount of algae on the front of the glass, and if you're doing this every week, you really shouldn't, but let's say you did. The nice thing here is that we're going to release that algae into the water, and then later on we're going to do a water change and hopefully remove a lot of what we've scraped off while we're doing the water change. So this can take a little bit of time depending on the condition of your tank. As you can see here, our glass is in really good shape. We're really just doing this for demonstration purposes only. I've talked about how to control algae in a fish tank. I'll put that video in the upper right hand corner as well as in the description below. But because we control our lighting and our food and the amount of nitrates in the water, and we've got some fish here that help kind of keep the glass clean, this part of our fish cleaning time, our fish tank cleaning time really it doesn't take that long. One thing I wanted to mention after she got done scraping the glass is if you buy an algae scraper, make sure this part is white. And the reason for that is it's going to show the algae much better, and you're going to be able to see parts that you've missed where if this is dark, you're not going to be able to see it as easily. And by the time you get done, you're like, oh man, I missed some algae. That can be a real pain. So if these are white, this makes it a lot easier to clean your glass. All right, so the next thing, after we've got the glass all nice and clean, your water might be a little cloudy after that. Don't worry. Now we're going to go ahead and start doing the water change. Now here we've got the gravel vac. I highly recommend this, especially if you don't have live plants. We're going to want to remove detritus and uneaten fish food and fish waste from the substrate. That's going to help you tremendously in keeping your nitrate concentrations down to that 20 parts per million or less. When you are looking at a gravel vac, there's a couple things that I would highly recommend. One, make sure that this thing is long enough for your fish tank and so that it's not undersized. Two, and this is a really important thing, gravel vacs that have this self-priming bulb where you can actually suck up the water, just kind of squeezing this part, is going to make your life so much easier. Now, this is also where the bucket comes in handy, because your gravel vac is going to drain into one of three areas depending on how you have your fish tank set up. One, you can drain it into a 5-gallon bucket and then carry that bucket back and forth to a fish tank. That's fun, right?
Yeah, good times.
Two, you could, if you've got a long enough hose, and actually this hose is 25 feet long, you could drain this into a tub or a sink, or if you've got some type of drain, maybe you're in the basement, it could drain into there. What we do, and I've done a video on this before, is we actually have a wastewater system where this is going to drain into some PVC that goes around the fish room and empties into a drain on the other side. So that's how we do it, but a gravel vac can empty into a bucket. It can empty into a sink of some kind, as long as the sink is lower than the tank. And so we're going to go ahead, you can go ahead and start the process here, and we're going to show you what this looks like. I'll get you some up close and personal picture. So we're just going to go ahead and put this thing in the tank. That's the water exiting the gravel vac. Now I squeeze this thing to get the water started, and maybe you can hear it. And so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to gravel vac. And so what you can see here, go ahead and push that all the way to the bottom. You push this thing all the way to the bottom of the glass, and you're going to see that it's starting to suck up some fish waste. Now again, we clean our tanks every single week. This tank I wouldn't say is extremely heavily stocked, but we have a number of cichlids in this tank. And so we go ahead and we're going to do the entire tank, front to back, side to side. And so yes, we gravel vac all of the gravel. There's not a lot of fish waste coming on here. This is also a good time where if you did have some fish, do a little bit of digging and you want to straighten up that gravel a little bit, you can certainly do that. Now, this is a large tank, and it's going to take a while for this to drain. I'm not going to make you sit through the entire process of us draining it, but you can see here we're going side to side, front to back. We're straightening out our gravel as we go. During this time, if you wanted to go ahead and inspect your equipment, that would be a good time to do it. And so, especially the filter, this would be a good time where we would switch out the filter media and make sure that that is fully running. Now, here's the trick with especially if you've got a hang-on back filter. And in this tank, we've got two different types of filtration. We have the hang-on back in the back of the tank. We're going to go ahead and switch out the filter media. The way you know if it needs to be switched out, if it's got brown gunkiness to it, it's time to change it. If you could still see the original color of the filter media for the most part, you might be able to let it go for another water change. The sponge filters that you can clearly see over here, well, kind of clearly see behind the gravel vac, there's another one over here behind me. I turned those off before we started the video because it'd be very difficult to hear us with the air system running in the fish room. But we go ahead and clean those as well. Want to know how to do that? Check out this video in the upper right hand corner as well as in the description below. But we do maintain our filters on a weekly basis just based on the fish tank or the fish stocking that we have in this tank.
Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to cleaning the filter, I wanted to give you a really good example. So this is some filter floss. You can see the top part was part that was kind of sticking out of the top of the filter. So it didn't really come into contact with any nasty stuff, but clearly the bottom part did. That's gross. We're definitely going to be changing this out. Now, if the entire filter floss looked like this, you could potentially just rinse it and put it back. But this is really nasty, so we're going to use our fresh stuff. And we're just going to go ahead and pack that in the back of the hang-on back filter and also clean the sponge filters at this time. All right, so real quick, this is our clean filter floss. I just generally kind of fold it in half just like this. It's bulk filter floss. It's going to catch all the nasty stuff that winds up in the water. It's more for mechanical filtration. I just go ahead and put it right back in the back of my filter. Now, one thing. That was really loud, sorry. One of the things you have to consider, the way we just did that, if there is any fish waste sitting on the bottom of that hang-on back filter, it may very well blow into the tank. So what some people do, and what we do as well sometimes, is we'll actually take the entire hang-on back filter off the tank, just dump out whatever water is in there, and then put it back on the tank. That's going to prevent a lot of the fish waste that's built up on the bottom from re-entering the water. If you don't do that, you are going to get some, and I'm going to show you this because I didn't do it, you are going to get some fish waste coming back into the tank right after you clean it, but the filter's just going to suck it right back up. Usually it clears up within about 15 or 20 minutes. So Joanna's doing a great job. She's still gravel vacuuming, making sure the tank looks great. How much water do we need to empty? Again, I mentioned this before, but it's based on nitrate. So if you take a nitrate reading, and I'm assuming your tank is fully cycled, we have no ammonia and no nitrite. All right, the tank is fully cycled. We are now just dealing with nitrates that build up as a byproduct of the microbes doing the nitrification process, ammonia to nitrite, nitrite to nitrate. If we're just dealing with the nitrates, that's going to be emptied, that's going to be removed by doing the water changes. For this particular tank, we have to empty about half of the water in order to ensure that our nitrates aren't going to climb above 20 parts per million by the time we do the water change again next week. And so this particular tank gets a 50% water change once per week. A lot of people ask, hey, can we do smaller water changes more often? Actually, that would be more ideal potentially, because the less stress you can put on your fish, the more stable your water parameters are, the better it's going to be. So if we had the time and we didn't have 70 or 80 tanks up and running, yes, maybe what we would do, instead of doing 50% water change once a week, we could do 10% water changes, and we would almost be done for today. But we just do this once a week, 50%. The fish have survived that and thrived for a long time. But if you want to do smaller ones more often, that's perfectly fine. Now, if I were just doing this by myself, once I'm done with the gravel vac part of this, I would just let the tank drain. That's typically when I would do the filter maintenance on the sponge filters and the hang-on back. And also, one thing you might want to check, and that is the lids. If you have glass lids on the top of your tank and you've got lights that are showing through like we do, those glass lids can often accumulate algae or hard water stains, and it's really nice when you can wash those off or scrape those off. It will make your tank look a lot nicer. Now, what about the decorations in the tank? We've got some wood, we've got some rocks, we've got some fake plants in this tank. What am I doing with those? And the answer is nothing. I almost never remove decorations from the tank when I'm doing my cleaning. And the reason for that, there's a couple reasons. One, generally speaking, I like the natural look. There's a little bit of algae on the rocks. I'm fine with that. Two, it would be a real big pain to remove all these rocks every single time I wanted to clean them. We've got this large piece of driftwood here. The fake plants, you can see, they're not completely green anymore. We've got a little bit of algae on the fake plants. I'm completely okay with that. Again, I think it gives a little bit more of a natural look, but more importantly, if you are changing out filter media, if you are cleaning sponge filters, you are going to reduce the number of beneficial bacteria in your filtration system. And over time, what you want are those beneficial microbes to be growing on the inside surfaces inside your fish tank, on the surfaces inside your fish tank. And so we're not relying strictly on the beneficial microbes in the filters. We have them all over the tank. And so therefore, I don't really clean the decorations inside. Now, of course, if you've got decorations that are just unsightly, there's a bunch of blackbeard algae on them or something, and you really want to get them cleaned off, maybe you've got a lot of green hair algae, of course you can pull that stuff off. You can use a 10% bleach solution on a lot of your plastic plants and things like that. We just choose not to. We go with a more natural look and depend on the microbes that are on those surfaces to do some of that ammonia to nitrite, nitrite to nitrate, the nitrification process. All right, so we emptied out the water that we're going to empty out for this demonstration. Normally we'd bring it down a little bit further, but it's fine for the demonstration purposes. You're going to see that the tank already looks a little bit brighter. The only reason it looks brighter is because I just cleaned the lid. So before I told you, if you clean the lids, it allows more light to shine through into the tank. I did that. There was some algae up there. It's now shining a lot brighter. So next step is, of course, we've got the filter media changed out. Everything is ready to go. The gravel vac is good. We scraped the algae. We emptied out the water. Now we have to refill the tank. Now, depending on how large your tank is and the mechanism that you have, you might just be using buckets to refill your tank. For us, we have this thing that we use. This is hooked up directly to a sink in our fish room. We want to make sure, the most important thing here, two things. One, we want to make sure that the water that we are putting in this tank is the same temperature as the tank water. We don't want to be stressing out any of our fish with a major change in the temperature of the water. The second thing is, we're going to want to make sure that as we start this process, we use a dechlorinator in order to make sure that the chlorine or chloramines in your tap water, if that's in fact what you are using, don't wind up stressing out our fish, hurting our cycle, killing our bacteria, hurting the gills of our fish. A lot of questions often, one of the questions we get often is, when do we add the dechlorinator? Is it before or after or during a water change? I have found it really doesn't matter as long as you get it in there. The sooner you can get it in there, the better. So generally speaking, I would like to add it right about now, and then I'll go ahead and start adding in the water. If you want a good dechlorinator, check out the Fritz Dechlorinator. They are a channel sponsor. I will put that information in an affiliate link down in the description below, but they've got a pretty good one. So we're gonna go ahead, let's get this thing filled up. You know, one of the things I wanted to mention while we're filling the tank, and I forgot to mention it when we were doing the gravel vacuuming, if you have plants or if you have an aquarium with sand, you generally don't want to gravel vac into the substrate. Instead, what we do is we will generally just kind of wave the gravel back above the surface and suck up any of the detritus that's on the surface of the sand or on the surface of the substrate in a planted tank, but we generally don't like to disturb the roots. If the sand is heavy enough where you can actually gravel vac into the sand without sucking it up, that's fine, but generally speaking, we don't go into the substrate in a planted tank, and in the sand, we're very conscious of the fact that we don't want to have the gravel vac sucking up sand into our plumbing. All right, now one of the things we're gonna do here, we're gonna turn the power back on to everything now that we've got the tank all filled up. And I can hear this particular hang-on back filter is self-priming, which means the motor is actually in the water, so we don't have to make sure the back of the hang-on back filter is filled up. You can see here, we are getting a little bit of detritus that's going back into the tank, and I know it's like, oh my gosh, I just cleaned my tank, and now I got a little bit of stuff that just came back in. So what? It's going to get sucked up. Like I said, give it 15 or 20 minutes. If that happens, and your tank is going to be fine. All right, so this is basically it. The last thing we're going to do, and that is you clean the front of the glass. Just get a glass cleaner and some paper towels. I'm going to spray a little bit, just enough to wipe down the hard water stains or you know, any drips that you got on the front of the glass. Make sure your glass cleaner solution is not going into the glass. You never, ever, ever want to put any kind of soap or detergent into the tank when you have fish in there, or even if you're going to be putting fish in there, because that would obviously do a lot of damage to them. So everything we did inside the tank, whoop, missed a spot over here.
Chad.
Everything we did inside the tank, we just used a glass scraper, the gravel vac, all that stuff. None of that stuff had any type of cleaning agent on it. The filter floss doesn't have any cleaning agent. We didn't use any cleaning agents inside the filter. If you were going to use anything to clean the decorations, you would have to remove them, put them in a bucket or a sink with your 10% bleach solution, really rinse them off before they go back in the tank. So we don't want any type of cleaning agent in this tank. You're also going to notice the tank is a little bit cloudy right now. That is totally normal after a water change. Again, if we were to come back and look at this tank in like an hour or two, it's probably going to look pretty darn good. That's why we clean them. And so that, my dear friends, is how to clean an aquarium. If you haven't seen the other parts of the beginner's series, or if you haven't taken a look at our water parameters videos, I highly recommend you do that. I will put those playlists here, right here, and they will also be in the description below. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you, Joanna, for all of her hard work actually cleaning the tank. She got the good end of the deal.
Yeah, I got to help.
That's absolutely true. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Your part of the video is just cleaning the actual tank while I get to do all the fun part, talking. This is why I have an assistant, because she cleans the tank and I just get to talk. She's like, oh, we're going to do this video together? Yeah. Well, what am I going to say? Not much. Just going to clean the tank. All right.